It's the WP Minute Plus, your home for long-form discussions with WordPress professionals and industry experts, covering our favorite topic, WordPress. Be sure to follow us. Search for WP Minute in your favorite podcast app. Follow this podcast and our 5-minute weekly edition. Or head to thewpminute.com/subscribe and join the newsletter. I'm told it's like a warm WordPress blanket that gets delivered to your doorstep every week. Looking for all things WordPress? The WP Minute has you covered. This episode of the WP Minute Plus is brought to you by our friends at OmniSend, the top-rated email and SMS marketing platform for WordPress stores. With OmniSend, you'll be launching pre-built e-commerce automations in no time, as well as intuitively segmenting customers based on their shopping behavior and even trying out SMS or push notifications all from the same platform. More than 100,000 e-commerce brands use OmniSend to drive sales and build better customer relationships, converting their customers with quick-to-create, highly relevant emails and texts. Are you ready to start building campaigns that really sell and convert your customers? Find out more at omnisend.com. That's omnisend.com, OMNISEND.com, omnisend.com. And give your brand the boost it deserves. Hey, Pippin. Good to see you.
Thank you, Matt. Pleasure to be here. It's been a long time.
I reached out to you the other day because WordPress world is changing, as you witnessed before your air quotes exit. You're always on my mind. You're always on my mind. It's the first time I've ever sung on a podcast. And I'm always just curious, what are you doing these days? Give us that recap of what's going on with Pippin.
So, first of all, my primary focus right now is twofold. One is just being more present and available and around family. That was my number one reason to leave the WordPress world. We had some family health issues and we're just, very aware that our time is short and precious. And my work had been pretty all-consuming for me. And so at some point I realized that it would be best for all of us on our family if we set that aside. And then what's it like to leave the WordPress world? Well, truthfully, when I left, which has now been a little over 2 years ago, I got to a point where I was definitely far less enamored with WordPress as a platform and with all of the work involved that me and my team and just in general what was being done around the WordPress space. It was not as exciting for me anymore. It was more of it had kind of become a bit of a grind, truthfully. So leaving it was, well, first of all, terrifying because it was all that I had known in my professional life. But it's been great. I don't believe that there's a lot of things that could have gone a little different, things that I wish I had done better or, et cetera. But I would describe it to you in this way. 0 regrets. Absolutely. We know for certain that it was the right move for us and for our family. So I do pay a little bit of attention to the WordPress world, just try to kind of keep an eye on what's happening, what my former team members are working on and what kind of things are going on over there. And mostly out of curiosity sake, I do still use a collection of WordPress products, including some of my former products on a couple of website projects, but I barely touched any code. I've done one small little custom development project, actually worked on with my dad for a former client of his. And that was fun to get back into the development world, but I immediately realized that I was very rusty. It was fun, but it was both really refreshing because it was like, oh, cool, I can still do this. This is, I can really enjoy this. But it was also a reminder of, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. This is not my jam. Yeah. So, yeah, the world is good.
Do you follow Gutenberg and Block? This is weird. This is like a celebrity. Do you even look at this stuff anymore, man? Having known you being so rooted in this, I
do look a little bit at it. I don't pay attention very much to development news and what's coming or what's in the next version of Gutenberg, what's coming to WordPress core, or what are the major developments on this plugin or that plugin. But I use WordPress for a couple of sites that I still run. And I use Gutenberg actively on those, as well as Elementor and a few other things. It's interesting. I actually had a funny conversation the other day because as anybody who's been in the WordPress world for a long time knows, there's this weird, take the combination of, say, Gutenberg and Elementor. There's some wonky things that happen in that user experience. Some of them are great. Some of them are not great. And I was showing one of my team members at the brewery, like how to make changes on our brewery website. And I was showing him like the kind of the like, here, this way, over here, you're going to use the Gutenberg editor. And over here, you're going to use Elementor. And over here, well, this part over here is the way it is because of a long history of, the core and plugins doing different things. And it was, in a way, it was fun because it was like, I still intimately understand and know like why some of these behaviors or like why the interactions between Elementor and Gutenberg or, some of the old WordPress editor stuff is still there. I know why that's all like that. But I also have been out of the WordPress world long enough that I almost feel like I was coming back in with a fresh set of eyes. And like, there's some stuff in here that like, this is not great. This is rough. And so it was kind of interesting getting that like different experience. I think when I lived in the WordPress world day in and day out, there's so many things that you get used to and either you accept or you recognize that, hey, we're working towards improving these, or whether it's we as in me and my team, or it's, somebody else within the WordPress space is working to improve these. And I think we maybe are more accepting of certain challenges. And now that I'm not intimately in the WordPress world anymore, I see those, I think, more as like an end user and experience them that way.
I think when you sold the business and you moved on from WordPress, that was a chapter of WordPress's life where a lot of people were, whether they were a business owner or not, like sort of feeling burned out from WordPress. Like we've, at that point in our lives, it was, 12 years or more consumed with WordPress, building for WordPress, teaching WordPress. And then the software was changing with the introduction of Gutenberg in this sort of new direction. A lot of unhappy people. And it was like that for a few years. And listen, I lived it. Same thing. Man, do I want to keep podcasting about this? Do I want to keep doing this content thing? And it was challenging. I think we're entering a new chapter because I think the software over the last couple of years, yes, it's been rough. It still is rough. Some rough, I should say. But I think it's going to get better in 2024, certainly into 2025. And I think there's going to be this other roller coaster ride. Putting that aside for a second, when you look back on your decision, what was that hamster wheel that you were on that you are so glad to be off of now? Like, what is it that you look back on and say, damn, this was the right decision?
There's probably a lot of pieces to that answer, but here's the main one. I realized that one of the things that I was, just to be brief, I guess, very tired of, and that I did not feel that I had the energy and want to do anymore, is the requirement when you are a product development company to keep up with all of the other things that are happening within the ecosystem that are constantly causing you to have to detract from your current focus and do so, and for like, give a couple of big examples, like, we're building these products and then all of a sudden the GDPR thing comes in, a few years ago. And then we're focusing on all of these products and then EU VAT issues come up. And then we're focusing on these products and then a major change comes to WordPress core. Then a major change comes to, a different product that is frequently used within our own products. Basically the endless cycle of, development challenges was initially really fun. Like that's one of the things that makes building something, especially in open source, so enjoyable and exciting because there's always a new challenge. There's always something new to do. Like there is no such thing as done. There's no such thing as done. But I wanted to have an endpoint. Like at some point I was like, well, where do we stop building? There is no such thing as like this product is now done until the day it is retired. And so either we retire a product like as a team, or we stop working on that product, either at like personally, like I leave the business or we sell the product to somebody else. Like that is the only endpoint for a development project inside of, let's just be fair and say within the realm of the internet, right? If you build a product on the internet, the only endpoint is when you hand over control of the product or retire the product. And so in a way, like I kind of realized that like we were on a development hamster wheel, as is every other product development company. And so there wasn't really an end in sight for like the type of work that we did for me. And I just realized I didn't want to do that work anymore. It wasn't what I enjoyed. And then the other one is that, and I started to recognize this much, much more as I was building out the brewery alongside the WordPress side of the business, was that if you're not growing, you're dying. That is the reality of the tech world. And I did not like that mindset. I came to really battle with that mindset of, why does that have to be the case? The lovely thing about the brewery business is that it doesn't have that mindset. We get to a point where we are happy with our production levels and our sales levels, and that's just where we stay. Of course, there's always a desire to grow a little more or bring in a little more revenue or increase your profit margins, et cetera. But the mindset within this business is vastly different than in the tech world. Of that endless pursuit of growth is not there. Now, not to say that that doesn't exist, within the beer industry, because it absolutely does. And you can see that pretty clearly if you go and look at some of the macroeconomic things that are happening within the beer industry. But for us, it doesn't exist because we built our brewery business as little more than a neighborhood brewery. We're just a neighborhood tap room. That's all we are. And so there is no okay, what's our 10-year growth plan? There is no, we have to keep growing. We have to keep increasing our distribution footprint. We have to keep increasing our production volume. No, we found the endpoint and we can just enjoy existing now. And that is lovely. I mean, seriously, that is one of the best things, because we're not on a hamster wheel. I mean, there's still hamster wheels within the beer industry. Absolutely.
Yeah, business is business. But, right.
Yeah. But I think that's the thing that I look back on and I realize, man, I enjoy not being so caught up in okay, what's the thing that I have to worry about that's coming down the pipe from WordPress core? What's coming down the pipe from WooCommerce? Or what's coming down, or, what are the things that are coming down, from the legal side of things, for example, like GDPR or EU VAT or taxation issues. Just not having to worry about those as much is lovely. So those are some of the things I look back on from the business side of things and say no regrets.
What do you think now, again, looking back on it, is more satisfying? Is it more satisfying being synonymous with EDD, walking around a WordCamp, people going, oh my God, because of you, I run my own plugin business. I sell $200,000 worth of plugins. You've changed my life. Or is it sliding that beer across the bar, having somebody sip it and say, damn, this is good? Do you have a level of priority there?
I don't know. I look back and there's a lot of things that I'm really proud of that we did, that I take great pleasure in, saying yeah, that was what my team did. That's some of the stuff that we did and that I did. I look back and when I told the team what was happening, that I was selling the business, I looked to the way that the things that they said to me and the way they reacted to the news. And the truth is, everybody, in general, everybody understood and everybody was happy for me, but everybody was very disappointed in my decision. And the reason was because we had built something awesome. We had built a great team. And, the way that a couple of team members described it was that it was the end of an era of the way that our team worked together. And that's what I look back and I say, that's what I'm the most proud of. Sure, I'm proud of the products that we built. I'm proud of, a lot of the information that we, through, WordCamp presentations and blogs and, a lot of we were there throughout the development of the commercial WordPress ecosystem, and we helped with a lot of it. And I'm really proud of that. But I'm most proud of the quality of the team that we were able to build around the products and the way that we took care of our people. That's what I'm the most proud of. So do I get more satisfaction from the history of everything that we did within the WordPress space, or talking to our local customers and sliding the beer across the counter? I think they're on par with each other. I think they're very different, but there's a lot of satisfaction that is kind of rooted in the same psychology for both of them. I actually, for the brewery side of things, it's much less about the beer itself as it is the space that we have built and the community that we have fostered around it. Our goal going into the brewery business was not to sell beer. Our goal was to build a community within a local community, a community space, and to be a community gathering space, to be that third place for people, and to be a force of positive change within our local community. That was our goal.
Yeah. And
we've been able to see that happen. And we've been able to see the proof of that actually happening. And so I get great satisfaction from that. I'm proud of the beer that we make, but the beer is nothing more than a vessel through which to actually achieve our goal, which is to be a community gathering space.
And this is probably a fantastic time for you, right? Holidays, not just like business-wise, but community-wise, getting people to come, maybe do events, meet up with people, have a holiday party, stuff like that on site is a very fulfilling thing.
It is.
A lot of synergies between, hey, Sandhills Development had a Slack channel, or you met up with people at WordCamp and you had this like digital community, and now you're doing the same thing. You were and all your products was a creative outlet for you, but now so is making beer, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's
what, and both of them were ultimately rooted in like the value that we ultimately got from both of them. Setting all of the monetary side things aside, the value that we got was the relationships and the community building that EDD and Affiliate OP, et cetera, that those fostered and created for us. And then the community and the relationships that the brewery have fostered and created for us as well. That's the most valuable.
I forgot to frame this, but how disconnected are you from WordPress these days? Like, you don't even have, you're not on Twitter, right? Unless you have like a lurking account.
I mean, technically it's still there, but I don't use it.
Yeah, but you don't use it. Like, you're not even online looking at this stuff, right?
The closest I get is, I still get some email notifications from a whole series of newsletters, and slowly over time I do kind of weed them out and, unsubscribe from some that, I decide that I'm not too interested in anymore. Most of the connection that I have is to a few specific core set of people that I still communicate with, not as actively as I would like. One of the side effects of leaving the WordPress space that I knew was going to happen, but it's kind of interesting when something's going to happen versus actually experience it happen. Like, I knew that I was going to have to be much more intentional about maintaining a bunch of relationships and maintaining the communication, because a lot of my really strong relationships within the WordPress community, both with coworkers and friends, et cetera, naturally was maintained through the work that we did. I don't do that work anymore. So I'm not actively talking to this person every day about this thing that we're working on together, or this thing that we're working on, or this, this collaboration with this other team, or et cetera. None of that's happening anymore. And so, it's very easy to go weeks, months, and suddenly realize oh, hey, I haven't talked to that person in a long time. I wonder how they're doing. I should check in with them. You have to be very intentional about it. And I will be honest and say that I'm really bad at it. I'm really bad at it. So, that's definitely something I knew that would happen, but actually recognizing it and experiencing it happening, still caught me off guard.
Yeah. The hamster wheel we chatted about before, keeping up with taxes, keeping up with the business side of things, keeping up with the software side of things. I'll hit you with the harder question because I'm sure the listeners are curious. Syed and Awesome Motive still has a lot of bad press. I'm very friendly with Syed. He's in my Slack membership. We chat often. I recently interviewed him about this. Look, man, people are saying they don't like these marketing practices. They don't like the way you handle this stuff. And he is very unapologetic about his approach to business because he has a very focused mindset. I'm growing the business. I'm serving customers. I'm building the product. I rinse my hands. I repeat, and I'm not doing anything wrong in the sense of growing a business and serving customers. Looking back, do you feel Awesome Motive was the best place for your products to go?
I think so. Yes. So there's two primary angles that when assessing, actually, there was three things. When assessing who I wanted to hand them over to, there's three things that had to happen. One, the team had to be taken care of. Two, the products had to be taken care of. And along with the products, the customers have to be taken care of. I put those together. And then the third is the price has to be right. Those were kind of the three things that I had to balance when discussing handing over the products and the team to a new caretaker. And let's be completely clear that there was no perfect buyer. There was no one was absolutely perfect. That is true of any transaction. And that is in no way a diss to anyone else who was a potential buyer. It is no way a diss to Automotive or Syed. In no scenario is there perfect. What there is who is the best fit of all of the criteria that you have. And along with those, fulfilling those three criteria, there also has to be a willingness and a desire. You could say, hey, this company over here would be the perfect, but if they don't have the desire to do it, then, that doesn't go anywhere. I absolutely believe that Automotive was the best steward for the products and to ensure their longevity and ensure their development and their success. I think there was no question about that. And I still feel very strongly that way. Now, I have to admit that I'm also saying this with what is happening around my former product ecosystems. I am not intimately familiar. And so, it's possible that there's been things that have happened or didn't happen that, people are either happy or unhappy about, and I am not aware of them. And so my answer here is still kind of going back to what I experienced and what I considered at the time of the sale and what I have been aware of post-sale, which as time goes on, I'm aware of less and less because I don't actively consume that information digest anymore. I know that we had a higher team turnover than I had hoped. In any transaction, any handover of a business, you're going to have some turnover for one reason or another. More turnover than I thought would. And that I was not thrilled about. I'm not going to pretend to know the ins and outs of why some of those turnovers happened. Whose side was it? I don't know. I just know that it happened. That's all. And I wish that had gone a bit better because it was absolutely my goal and hope to secure 100% of the team in the transition and for everybody to be thrilled with it and be really happy with the results. And I know that not everybody was, but I also know that it was going to be impossible to perfectly take care of everybody. We did the best that we could, or at least I felt that we did at the time. One of the things that I really stressed about a lot when deciding whether or not Automotive was the right place for the products to go, or if someone else was the right place, was I wanted to ensure that the products had a future. One of the things that we've seen on a lot of the consolidation of the WordPress space over the last 12 to 15 years or so has been, and not to pick on a particular segment of companies, but hosting companies have a knack for buying a product and then, merging it in, and then it disappears over time. Either it gets merged into something else, like as part of the hosting package, or the team gets siphoned off, the talent gets siphoned off to other projects, and then the product languishes and dies. I felt that handing the products to someone like Automotive, who is a very product-focused company, was the best way to ensure that the products had a future. And I think that's still the case.
Yeah.
With some of the other conversations I had, because, Automotive was far from the only potential acquirer that we talked with. It was very clear in those conversations that they were interested in, and they being people other than Automotive, they were interested in, this product, but not these two. Like they might take them all, but they really only wanted one. And so that was like the automatic, death sentence to those products if we went to that acquirer. Automotive was the only one that said, yes, I want everything. I don't know if every product has gotten equal love and care post acquisition. Ultimately that is up to them to decide and to weigh the pros and cons of putting development resources on each of the products.
So I think that there's a lot of folks in the space, and I totally agree with you. Like if your products went to a hosting company, again, not to throw any shade at hosting companies, because we do have some sponsors who are hosting companies, the products would get lost. Because I think at the end of the day, like a hosting company is just going to be infinitely more scalable and profitable than a WordPress plugin. So some bean counter is going to sit there and be like, geez, do we keep investing in this EDD thing? Or do we just keep getting more hosting customers? Yeah. Because hosting is always going to win in terms of profitability and scale.
That's one of the major things that we thought about as we were going through the process of, picking out and vetting the acquirer, et cetera. And, truthfully, hosting companies probably would have been willing to pay a much higher dollar, because they almost always are, because 100%. They have the biggest budgets. But we did fine for ourselves. Let's just be clear with that. But we intentionally walked away from, a much bigger payday, if you will, because we wanted to ensure, the best care for the products and the team. And the choice that we made is where we felt we had the best likelihood of success for all three major metrics.
I get a lot of flack. I wrote a piece, 90 days ago, 120 days ago about Awesome Motive. And once again, been friends with Syed forever. People called me an apologist for Awesome Motive, right? And my thing is, if the community, WordPress, largely the very active WordPress community is developers, designers, agency owners, freelancers that are building sites and solutions for end users. If you're not happy with it, don't use their products. If you come across a company, I know this sounds harsh, but if you come across a customer who's using it and you are that passionate about not using Awesome Motive products, to replace it with something else and tell them, this is what I want to use.
Yeah, that's true. That's the definition of voting with your dollars.
Right. It's a definition of voting for your dollars. And if Awesome Motive was doing stuff really bad, customers wouldn't be buying it, right? But the company continues to grow. Last chat I had with Syed, he said, we're at 400 plus people now. And the last time I interviewed him, he was at 200. So he doubled the size of the company.
Yeah, it was around 200 when we sold.
So the company's still growing. I get it. He has a particular strategy that a lot of people don't like. There's some borderline there is this legal with content and marketing? I'm not here to decide that because I'm not a legal person, right? And I certainly don't have the lawyers to defend myself if Syed was like, hey, Matt, didn't like what you said. You're going to send my lawyers after you. But that will happen. If it's something that's that bad, the chips will fall eventually. I'm not an apologist. I'm just saying he's running it the way any traditional business I know is run. You might not like some of the marketing practices, but let the market decide that. And if you're that passionate against it, find products you can put in place. And if you can't, then he has a great product. I don't know what else to say.
I totally agree with that.
When you were in negotiation, I forget, because I did interview you back on the Matt Report when this all happened. Did you ever talk to Automatic?
Yes. And it's actually kind of funny because I had reached out to Matt directly and we had a couple of brief conversations, and Automatic was actually one of the ones that basically said they were interested in one or two of the products, but not all of them. So that kind of stopped the conversation there. We didn't think it was going to go anywhere. And then we had gotten pretty much all the way through with the automotive side of it. And then they reached back out and was like, okay, now we'd like to chat. And I was like, dude, we're already in a contract. I came to you months ago. And so too bad.
Can you say which products they were most interested in?
Affiliate MV.
Really? Wow. I was actually going to say EDD. That's interesting. It's funny because Matt recently tweeted a little, I guess, snarky sideball comment that he tends to do about Elementor raising their prices. And he mentioned something like, hey, a lot of page builders are going to be raising prices and churning customers because they can't keep up with the demand and the technology moving so fast. I'm paraphrasing here, but basically saying Gutenberg's the way to go, site editing's the way to go. Had you all invested in this in the past, they being Elementor and all these other page builders, maybe we'd all be in a different boat. Gutenberg site editing would be better, your businesses would be better. And I was just that's a typical Matt comment because, there's a lot of features that these companies have that are really good. Aside from performance with Elementor, you might complain about that, or code quality, you might complain about that, but you're taking web development and really making it simplified for a lot of people that enable them to build websites that they could never ever do without, years of learning how to do HTML and CSS, JavaScript, and all this other stuff. And it's funny that affiliate WP was the one that he wanted, not augmenting WooCommerce.
The major advantage that plugin companies have, and I get that kind of comment from Matt or anybody who works, on the core platform,
saying like, hey, if we all just focus on core, we could build core, be much better. If we all just did this instead of building all these individual, plugins, why don't you guys come and help invest your resource into it? Well, the answer is because they can iterate really freaking fast.
Right.
Because they don't have to deal with the massive scale of the entire platform. They can do their own little section. And, obviously at this point, things like Elementor and any other major plugin are monstrous. And so, that's the pace at which they can iterate is a little slower than say when they were, new. And that's true of every product that gets built out over time. Your development gets a little bit slower because your scale gets bigger, both in terms of your audience, but also like the code base, the complexity of it. But it's a pretty hard ask to say, why don't you do less of this thing where you can work really fast and do really good work and build the features that people want, and instead come build with us really slowly. Like it's kind of a hard ask. And that's why that's also one of the great benefits of the plugin ecosystem, and it's why it's always been that way. It doesn't surprise me that some of those quips have happened.
Yeah,
and will continue to happen.
I don't want to go deep into the mindset of Mullenweg, but it's always felt like that. He's always said things like that. Hey, the reason why the reason why WordPress grew so fast was because of Jetpack. This was like 8 years ago. He said this, and it's just like, no, it was not. And it was through this. It was through the same issues that everyone has had with WordPress. Like, why does it do it this way? Why did one theme go this route? Why does a plugin have these options? And it's that fragmentation that people struggle with that are also the benefit to WordPress, because there are so many different ways to get things done. And out of that chaos comes innovation and hopefully a market leader of whatever, the plugin is.
Yeah. It's that fragmentation that I was describing earlier as like I stepped back into experiencing using Elementor and Gutenberg and just WordPress as a whole as an end user versus as a developer. This was a couple of weeks ago, and it is really interesting to get that new perspective again, because I've been intimately aware of the fragmentation that happens because of core versus plugins and the different paces at which they build and where the innovation is coming from. And I think we do tend to, as the developers and builders who are tied into the why and the process of how these things are being built out, we are very forgiving of that fragmentation. End users don't understand, or I shouldn't say don't understand, don't have the awareness or the knowledge of why that fragmentation exists. So all they experience is the fragmentation. And I think to, kind of side with Matt for a moment, the ultimate goal of the platform should be to provide a tremendous user experience. And it is very challenging to do that when you have a core platform that is, working towards a goal. And then you have, because the open source nature of the platform, plus the plugin ecosystem, you have all of these independent development teams that are working to their own goals. And you're, as the quote unquote captain of the ship, is really trying to steward them all into the same endpoint, but you have very little control over that. And so, that is not always a great user experience, but it's a really big challenge. And it's that is one of the challenges that I don't. Circling back to that question earlier of that's the hamster wheel.
Yeah.
Man, it feels good to not be on that.
You and Matt, very similar, multiple products, many different things that you were both doing. And it wasn't just EDD or affiliate WP. It was like, how do I manage this whole thing? And I see the issues here, again, Twitter sphere recently with, a lot of the Matt Mullenweg drama that came up, and it's like, hey, it's corporate overlordship. And he's trying to make this drag and drop platform so he can, for the betterment of WordPress.com and all this stuff. I just signed up for a WordPress.com account just so I could really drench myself in the automatic experience. And guess what? That is so far off the radar, because what I noticed is here's the problem. He doesn't have enough time or people to get this stuff done, because the WordPress.com experience isn't like, oh my God, is this going to take over WordPress.org? There's so many rough edges in that product, right?
Yeah.
And he has, never mind this whole Tumblr debacle, and he's got 7,000 other investments that he does. He needs core focus on core, right? To like really make this WordPress thing better. He's struggling with the same things we all struggle with. He just has that larger footprint, 2,000 plus employees. Yeah, billions of dollars in value, but it's not helping. And it's the same struggle we all have at the end of the day, in my opinion.
You know, that was one of the other things that like I was finding that my mental state and my ability to steer. So like on the Sandhills Development side, we had like 5 different ships that we were trying to steer. And then on the brewery, we had a ship that we were trying to steer. And then, you know, all the various family and personal ships that we're also trying to steer. I felt like I was at a point where I was just trying to captain too many ships. And I really just needed to narrow it down to 1 or 2. And I'll tell you that this is where I get to the no regrets. Because I look back and I say, yes, there are things that I could have done better. There are things that I wish had ultimately worked out differently. But I have never been in a better mental state in the last 10 plus years than today.
Yeah.
And that's pretty hard to put a price on.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's not to say that the last 2 years have been sunshine and rainbows. We've had a couple of really interesting challenges.
Price of barley.
Side. What's that?
The price of barley.
The price of barley? Though, truthfully, that's almost not impacted us. One of the nice things about being at like the nano scale of the beer industry is though the macroeconomics of supply chains, like, yeah, they impact us, but like we're talking like a few $100s a month impact as opposed to, you know, tens of thousands to millions of dollars, you know, because, you know, we buy 4,000 pounds of grain a month. Our bags of grain are, you know, 50 to 55 pounds each, and they cost between $30 and $55 each is kind of the standard price range. Well, when the price of barley goes up, we go from a $42 bag to a $42.50 bag. You know, when you're buying, you know, 50 to 60 bags a month, it doesn't make that much difference. Yeah. So those types of scales. But you did run some really interesting legal issues if you're interested at all. That was fun.
Yeah.
I don't know if fun is the way I would describe it. But,
yeah. What happened?
So about a year ago, we actually almost lost every license or our license to sell an alcoholic beverage by the glass due to this little thing called basically a food sales requirement, where there's this old law in Kansas that says if you are in certain counties, you are required to sell a certain percentage of your all of your alcohol sales must be food sales. And this is a law that has been on the books since the mid 80s, very poorly documented. There's no information or awareness at all about how enforcement or penalties or anything like that works. And anyway, the short version of what happened is we got caught surprised when suddenly the way this law was enforced changed. And we found ourselves in a situation where if we did not sell a massive amount of food, and recognize we're not a restaurant at all, we are just a beer tap room that sells a tiny bit of like pre-made food. We found ourselves where we had a 10-day window and we had to sell 1.5 times or 2x our annual food sales in 10 days if we wanted to keep our license. Otherwise, our license was going to be revoked, and which was going to kill the business. And so we sent out we ultimately made a plan, and we sent out a call on social media to our local community, basically saying, if you like and support this business and you like the fact that we are here and you think this is a value add to the community, we need you to come buy $10 hot dogs. We're going to be cooking hot dogs all night long and all week long, and we're going to bring in some smokers, and we're going to cook a whole bunch of smoked meats and other things, and we're going to bring in a whole bunch of pizzas, and we need you to come buy a whole bunch. And so we ultimately sold $43,000 of food in a 5-day window, and we were able to secure our liquor license through that. And then the challenge for the last year has been actually getting that law changed. So we have a lot of media publicity in our local community and all around the state as well about this issue, because this old archaic law that pretty much everybody thought was defunct and nobody actually cared about got really close to shutting down a local business, our brewery, that a lot of people really like and cared about. And so then after that happened, we were able to get involved into the legislative system to figure out how to actually change this law and get rid of it. And on November 7th, we successfully got rid of it. So we spent a year learning how to do it and going through the campaign process and, raising awareness, and then, ultimately culminating, getting people to go out to vote. And because it had to be done through a ballot measure. And so we had to have a simple majority, had to vote on it, and it passed decisively. So
is that just in your town or city charter, or is that a state level?
It's a state level law for the state of Kansas that is then passed down to each individual county within the state of how they want to do it. Basically, there was 3 options. You could be what's called a wet county, where you can be a bar or restaurant, but you don't have a requirement to sell food. You can be a dry county, which meant that you have no alcohol sales, or you can be a semi-dry county, which meant that you can sell alcohol, but you have to sell 30% food as well. The way that law was built, basically each of the individual counties was able to opt into one of those 3 statuses when the law went into effect. But then the law was designed to basically make it impossible for any county that chose to implement the food rule to make it impossible to have non-restaurant establishments that sold alcohol, which is what we are. We are not a restaurant. We are a small brewery taproom. And then the only way to change the law is to county by county. Each county can vote on it during an election, but the only way to vote on it is if you either get a certified petition of registered voters that puts it onto the ballot, or you get the county commissioners to pass a majority resolution to put it on the ballot. And then the registered voters in the county get to come out and vote on it, on whether to remove it or not. Wow. So our little food sales debacle last year that just about shut down the brewery successfully resulted in the change of this law in 4 different counties around the state of Kansas.
So, I mean, what is somebody with no time on their hand dust off some freaking rule book from the 1800s and say Sandhills Brewery is breaking the law? Like, how did it even come up?
So we don't really know, but we have a theory. The short theory is basically this. No one cared about this law. This law has not been enforced in a long time. And we are actually a perfect example of it, because the only time this law gets enforced is when you go through the renewal process for your liquor license, which happens every 2 years. 2 years ago, we went through the renewal process and we did not have enough food sales to qualify for the requirements of the law. Nothing happened. No one said anything. The licensing agency handed us our new license and up we went. But then 2 years later, which is the last year, we go through the same process again. But all of a sudden, they decide to care about it. What we discovered was that it's called the ABC, which is the Alcoholic Beverage Control, is the department at the state of Kansas that issues the licenses. Their legal oversight is the Attorney General for the state. And it just so happened that when we went through that in October of 22, the Attorney General happened to be running for governor. And so we're pretty sure that the Attorney General said, anything that falls under my purview must be absolutely by the book, everything, because I don't want any question about, whether or not how my administration is, or anybody under my jurisdiction is operating. Well, we then went on to uncover and discover that this rule that basically says if you sell $10,000 in combined food and alcohol, $3,000 of that has to be food for a 30% ratio. That rule is actually written into the internal handbook and the internal guidelines of the ABC that says if an establishment has 29.9%, they lose their license. There's no leeway, there's no flexibility or anything. And you absolutely are required to revoke their license. And technically, the way the rules are written, they're required to revoke the license at the time of discovery, not on a every other year review. It's literally like if we come at any point and you don't have 30%, you forfeit your license immediately. Well, we discovered that because that's the way the rules are written internally for how they're supposed to operate, they haven't been following their own rules for years. And we are an example of that because 3 years ago, they didn't follow their own rules and they gave us a license when they weren't supposed to. And then suddenly we go through the process again and they decide to enforce the rule to the T. And we're pretty sure it's because of Attorney General was running for governor. So that's our theory. We have no way to prove it, but that was our theory at the time. And ultimately, we were able to rally the support of our local community, and they bought a whole bunch of food, and we kept our license, which was, that's all we were trying to do. And then we were able to use that to successfully change the law. So I learned something in that whole process that I think I already knew. I am not built for politics. I do not like politics.
I was just going to say,
no desire to ever run a company.
That's how Pippin Williamson went from WordPress to governor of Kansas.
No.
From this process. Oh man, that is fascinating and also not surprising when it comes to local politics, which, is just like WordPress to a degree. Man, it's been great catching up. I'm so glad to hear about the mental health side of things. It's a race, and running a business, whether you're brewing beer or building plugins, there's challenges in each business. But I can certainly appreciate after, the decade plus that you sunk into WordPress or longer, that you found some peace in this exit, and maybe you'll come back one day.
One of the things that is true of any business, that if you are if you're the owner, the operator, what have you, is one of the things that will pretty much guaranteed happen is random things are going to land in your lap that you have no idea what to do with. You have no idea how to respond to it. And you just think, what the world? Like, I'm just trying to sell beer, or I'm just trying to sell WordPress plugins. This is totally unrelated. Why do I have to do this? But that is the reality of being a business owner, is it is a requirement of the job to get uncomfortable and do things that you are not comfortable with, or find a way to get around them. I think of back in the WordPress space when we had a crisis comes in of some kind or other of, there's a massive amount of fraud that is flying through our Stripe account, and we're trying to track down where it's coming from. And then you have something like GDPR come in. You're like, this is totally not my territory. Why do I have to do this? But that's the reality. In the beer business, a weird obscure law comes in and says, well, you don't have a liquor license if you don't do this. But we're just trying to do our thing. And, it's true of any business. The different challenges that you're going to face definitely will differ. And, the scale of those challenges will be different. But I think that's kind of what entrepreneurship is honestly about, is diving into the unexpected, the unknown challenges, and just finding a way through them. And it's definitely a fun journey. I'm enjoying it still. I'm still enjoying the world of business ownership, but I do really enjoy not checking my email as much.
Oh man, you should just come back to a WordCamp. It'd be amazing to see you. Sandhills Brewing. Can you ship beer?
We cannot, unfortunately.
Cannot.
That's another obscure annoyance.
Let me tell you, when you become governor, there's gonna be a lot of beer getting shipped. Now, is it just Kansas can't ship beer?
It's certain states.
Federal? Basically,
the liquor laws around the country vary from state to state. Some states can, some states can't. Kansas is one that does not allow you to ship, at least from the business. An individual can ship. You can ship it to your friends or family, but a business cannot ship. Interestingly, there's ways to ship beer into Kansas. You can't ship it out of Kansas.
A stage wagon with a couple of horses. .com. It's been great talking to Pippin again. If you're in the area, Hutchinson, Kansas, and Mission, Kansas, go to the tap rooms there. Check those out. Sandhillsbrewing.com. I did have a couple of questions that come in through Twitter really quick. Let's see. Jeff Chandler, you might know him, said, asked, are you satisfied with how Automotive has treated your products? I think we answered that already. Let's see what else we have here. Corey Moss said, I wouldn't ask him anything. I just thank him for everything he put into WordPress over the years. Oh. Devin Price asks, what's the best beer you've made recently?
Oh, German Doppelbock. Heavy, rich winter lager.
I see you have a New England. Don't you have a New England brew out here? I saw it. I thought.
We do. Truth that we make some of everything. And the beers that are shown on the website is just a very small subset of what we actually make.
Oh, okay.
Because basically we have our core beers, and then we do, one-off experiments every day. The thing that we always tell our customers when they come in the building is our menu will change every single week. So come back next week, it will be different.
Fantastic. Sandhillsbrewing.com. Pippin, it's been a pleasure.
It's been fun. Thank you so much, Matt.
That's it for today's episode. Get the weekly newsletter at thewpminute.com/subscribe. Want to support the show and join a Slack group filled with WordPress professionals like you? Talk about the news, share your WordPress business content, and network with others. Head to thewpminute.com/support and get access to our group. Support the show for as little as $5 or more if you feel we provided more value. Thanks to our pillar sponsors, Pressable, Bluehost, and OmniSend. Thanks to our Foundation Plus sponsors, WP World, Image SEO, and Hostinger. Thanks to all of our annual supporting members and you, the listener. Without your support, the WP Minute wouldn't be possible. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.